My name is Theo Gilbert, and I work at Hertfordshire University, University of Hertfordshire, and I'm obsessed with trying to help many psychologists get the word out there on what compassion really is. And compassion is you are here not because we are asking you to be more compassionate. You already are, or you wouldn't be here. So let's get to grips with what neuroscientists, group psychotherapists, clinical psychologists have been telling us for 20 years in education about what compassion really is. It's not an emotion, would you believe? It turns out that compassion is a psychobiological motivation and intention to do what? To notice, not normalize, distress of yourself and others. Where's the emotion in that? This is close, interpretative, vigilant, analytical observation. A psychobiological motivation, compassion, is to notice, not normalize distress or disadvantaging to yourself, and to do something smart about it. And it turns out through our evolution, I can explain how that happened, how that got wired into the brain. In our evolution, we have three brains. First, imagine like a little fist at the back of my head here, the reptilian brain that you know about. We started out with reptilian brains so that if there was ever a threat, for example, if I was a prehistoric man and I was walking through the savannah, if I saw something move in the grass, whoa, all my attention would be on that, of course. This helped the species survive. It helps every species survive, even down to singular cell level, to move away from danger. And then on top of that, the mammalian brain was built, which then moved us into being able to, equipped and motivated to really intensely invest in our infants so that they would survive. So breastfeeding, much longer periods of time looking after the infants. This too was another way for evolution to ensure that to make as sure as possible that our species could survive. That's the second brain, but they're bolted on, guys, and the alarm bell should be ringing here. The third brain too is also bolted on. The neocortex, this sort of thin tissue that goes around the top of the brain, which is the most incredible piece of engineering because it gives us what no other species has, which is the ability to imagine, to ruminate in our imagination. That can be a problem, to ruminate, to imagine, to rationalize, to reason. And as a result, we have philosophy, art, education, culture, language, all of that. Absolutely amazing. Now, if the mammalian brain, caring, starts to connect with its intention, with neocortex intention to care and share, that's what we were built for. We have compassion. We have really smart caring. And I would like to remind you, for example, of the picture that you may have seen of Patrick Hutchinson, the black grandfather who carried a white right winger on his shoulder. Do you remember that? When the white winger was abandoned by his team, how interesting, we're talking about teams today, and was carried. If you look at those pictures, you will see that there are others around him in his team who have their shoulder on him to say, we're with you, you're not alone. And the man over Patrick's head, his own head is being protected. The white man's head is being protected like this by another a colleague in this team of black men, simply because Patrick was saying he could feel the blows of the crowd raining down through the right winger's body into his own body. And so mammalian brain, they were coming around to protect, to hold, to touch. That's pure mammalian brain there. But if you look even closer into the picture, you see that the chap who's got his hand on Patrick's shoulder is guarding the flank. There's another one to the side guarding the back. There's another one to the other side guarding the front. How they managed to get this kind of the synchronicity between them in the moment is quite extraordinary. We think this has to do with oxytocin. All of this comes from our history, that when we came down from the trees with our reptilian brain, our mammalian brain, and our our neocortex. The neocortex developed very, very quickly because we had to work in teams. You see, even the whites of our eyes are still here so that we could see where each other were looking or where the danger was. If we did not work in teams, collecting, gatherings, hunter-gatherers, on the move, sharing everything, then we would not have survived. It was much later that agriculture was developed around 10,000 years ago, where we discovered the means of holding and controlling surplus, and down the species went flat on its face, really, in many, many ways. It means now that the threat system, hold, control, means it's became rather overstimulated and too big for its boots. And Genghis Khan's genes, for example, his DNA is estimated now to be in 16 million men. So the epigenetics, the consequences of this have been quite severe. And now let's have a look at today. So we've got tremendous attention to the threat system, overstimulation of the threat system in our children and young people. And we were part of it too in our generation. Who could do the best in education? We've got, thinking about it in more simple terms, think about competitive individualism in media, politics, education. My goodness, we even have people who can manipulate our threat systems, whole swathes of the population, so that we will murder millions of our own people. For example, Hitler was very, very good. The Jews are a threat. The homeless are a threat. Learning difficulties are a threat. Let's put them all in gas chambers. And there you have graduate engineers and graduate medical people perfectly willing to put their skills towards building gas chambers that would kill millions of their fellow citizens. Here's the trick. If a sociopath wants to get to power, and Daniel Goleman's done a lot on the very poor emotional intelligence of CEOs, he's done a lot of research on that. But if the sociopath is determined to get to power using wonderful skills like empathy, compassion like empathy is a skill. If I really wanted information out of any of you, what I would do was not put, if I was a sociopath, I would get it through empathy. I would not put the gun to your head. I would put the gun to your children, your parents, the person you most love. There is no emotion involved in the skill of empathy. It has its own distinct wiring in the brain from the distinct wiring for compassion too. So here are people coming up quite regularly now, being able to persuade us that our fellow citizens, our neighbors, our friends are actually our enemy. And you can think of lots of people who got away with this and are doing it all the time. This holding and controlling, keeping control of people is quite an insidious development for our species. Education has a massive role to play in that. Martin Luther King said, without a moral compass, education is very, very dangerous. It was highly educated people who set up the slave trade. They knew exactly what they were doing. It was highly educated people who set up the 2008 financial crash. They knew exactly what they were doing, and so on and so forth. So if we could just only go back to when we were working in teams, where if individuals could not share, they were not able to stay in the tribe, the group could not sustain them, their presence. We know that this was going on. For example, as a vertebrae, 1,600 years ago has been found that is so diseased, way beyond the expected point of death, that it's very clear that this individual was offered intensive nursing, being turned, having their feces and urine cleared, being cleaned 1.6 million years ago. This is how our species was developing beautifully, and the neocortex is still trying to push us that way. We can turn it back. So what I'd like to look at with you today is how we can set up teams which don't disintegrate into dissatisfaction amongst our students, and actually come together very inclusively. But I would say that this is just as much a problem for us in staff rooms too. You may have come across Crying in Cupboards, the book by the wonderful Mary Thornton and her colleague, on how so many teachers end up crying in cupboards because of bullying coming down from the top. There are cycles and hierarchies of bullying. So, and I find that it's the same in staff rooms in the workplace. The National Crime Agency came to see if they could find out about this. In staff rooms, in colleges, in schools, it's all over the place. But nobody is to blame. What we've got to do, I would suggest, is get the threat system under control. And we can do that through smart pedagogy. Here's a few. So I'd like to talk to you about a few ways we can do that. Setting up speed meets, not a little bit like speed dating, but let's call it compassionate solidarity. Speed meets, one-to-one, 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 can be very, very helpful in the middle of, at the start of, at the end of any lecture or seminar, and it's worth its weight in gold just to pop people randomly into a speed meeting in pairs, shuffle them up. Setting up first that they know how to behave with each other in teams, and they know that they are hardwired to be compassionate and inclusive. Just to forget for 1 minute the competitive individualism, you can set it up like this. The universe has been trying to get you into the world for literally millennia, exactly as you are. If even one of the uncountable configurations genetically or circumstantially had ever changed, you, the miracle that you are, would not be here. Meet another miracle now in the room that you'll be sent into. This person may be at your wedding, may help you get a great job in 5 years' time, may help you with childcare. But this is a moment in which will never happen again, just as the cloud formations we ever look at will never, never happen again. Make the most of it. In Ubuntu, for example, in African philosophy, you go alone, you go faster. We go together, we will go further. In Guanxi in Chinese mythology, for example, the goddess of compassion, she's being let into heaven at last, and she hears behind her an agonizing scream of despair and pain. Now, compassion is noticing, not normalizing pain and despair of yourself and others. Is she going to normalize it? She says, no. They say, come on in, it's not your problem. She says, I cannot. There is no heaven. There is no heaven while people are suffering like that. Sometimes I say to students, can you think of a loved one who's passed over who would be quite happy in heaven looking out of the windows to see the suffering below? And of course, people say, no, it's worth thinking about, isn't it? She goes back to hell. She goes back to hell to help. And therefore you find in the psychobiology of compassion from neuroscience, clinical psychology, there's a lot more now on courage. So how would we ask our students to behave in group work? One thing we could do is route their attention to compassion right into the system and assess it. Yes, we can assess it. We can assess the following ways of running group work, and you can observe it, assess it, or which should we say reward it, along with anything else you choose to reward in group work that you actually see and observe. So it would be an hour's discussion, for example, in which each student has brought along an article, their own article, on your previous lecture. You could do this in seminars every week. Students love it. So each student would present, say for 5 minutes, present what they understand from that article. It was their responsibility to bring this article notes of it, not to be reading like this, that's from a, but to be like a television presenter, just explaining. So this is an article by Rachel Beale, 2017, in the International Journal of Education, and this article focuses on bang, 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 trying to look like this. We ask students as well to keep all their cameras on. I don't want to do that, but we can persuade students. We have the most expressive species, the expressive face of any species. We had eyebrows here, big bony eyebrows here, which disappeared so that we could have eyebrows here that are very, very expressive. They twitch every time we meet somebody, even if we don't like them. We often say, as a teacher, I can't communicate with you. I can't see if you understand. But we're very used to, aren't we, having a look at seeing walls of initials. But in small groups, students can be persuaded to put their cameras on. It works like this. First of all, they can use a background. They can use a background so that if anybody's coming in behind them, they don't even see it. and neither does anybody else. They're starting to use, students are saying, okay, let's use shared background. And would you believe it? They're not choosing the inside of a factory. So it's not a classroom. Remember, our wonderful, wonderful friend, Ken Robinson was saying, you know, we're all built on a factory system because of the Industrial Revolution and the Age of Reason, and we're still trying to escape. Batching, everybody the same, all inspected at regular rounds. So we're finding students are getting out now and just sitting on a beach together. Well, this is wonderful. This is something wonderful. And of course, if they do decide that they're going to dive off, they will disappear. So online technology can actually keep groups safe, insular, protected, and united, cohesive. And it's nice for them to choose their own. Notice they won't be choosing inside buildings sometimes, and they certainly won't be choosing classrooms. Escape at last. To keep their screens on because of these incredibly expressive faces. If you say to students, look, I can't understand if you understand or not. Sometimes we get nowhere, but say this. If you say this, because of the deep, innate, hardwiring compassion in ourselves and our students, you may get a different response. When you put your screen on, when somebody is trying to speak to you, they can see that you are maybe nodding, smiling, supporting them. You have no idea how much that means to them. You actually put wind under their wings. You sustain their confidence by doing this. You find students are very motivated to help others, not themselves, but they'll help others in this way. It means, can you imagine with your beautiful expressive faces that were designed this way over millennia, that people can see you nodding, smiling, encouraging them, or maybe an international student doesn't understand. Even that, we see we're brilliant at reading each other's faces as well through oxytocin. And that means that you have an opportunity. This person has compassionately given you an opportunity to know the truth, that you didn't communicate that bit successfully. And all you need non-verbally is just to notice that and go back and explain again. Works a dream, absolutely works a dream. If somebody is disagreeing, then we know that something is going to come up there. So a student, so let's imagine we had 4 students here. Let's imagine Richard, Thomas, Kay, and I, we were 4 students. And we were put in a group, we were put in a group together, thrown into a breakout room, but we're armed. We've got our notes, even if they're on the back of an envelope. And we've got to speak for 3 minutes about this article. I found one by Beale. Somebody else has found one by Reed. Somebody else has found one by Hay, all right? And we decide who's going to present first. So Thomas first, Jenny next, and so on. And so Thomas, off he goes. This is an article I found by da-da-da, and explaining it, just explaining it in plain, simple language for a 12-year-old to understand. And it can help to tell them, look, when you're doing your PhDs, guys, if you don't write in plain language for a 12-year-old to understand, you'll never keep your examiners on board for 70,000 words. You won't do it. So the art is now to speak in plain language and move that into your writing. Oh, this view is problematic because, or that view or that argument or that method is questionable because, easy peasy lemon squeezy. So they start to get the hang of being able to discuss their articles. That's right. After Thomas has discussed explained his article for 4 or 5 minutes, then Thomas says, guys, what are your comments? Could you help me discuss this article? And we all pile in. And this is where the interactional stuff comes in. Because there are 2 things, as I said, that really, really do spoil group work. What we really want is that Thomas explains the article and we discuss it. That reminds me of, yeah, but I don't think that would work in this particular situation. Or if we were working with these sorts of children or neurodiverse children, would it work there? Students have the most wonderful imaginations. That's all Einstein said we ever need to be geniuses. Well, 90%, didn't he say that? Imagination. So in they come, and you will find as students gather their confidence over the weeks, they consider themselves, a Black student said, I've gone from feeling that people who shared their work like this were creeps. I'm a scholar. I'm a scholar. I have something to contribute. And they did it for themselves. So what we're wanting is that there's a 5 or 7 minute discussion, can be as long as you like, or 10-minute discussion of that article. And then the original presenter, so Thomas, would say, thanks, everybody. He may even want to draw a couple of points together, but in any case, he's going to say, thanks, everybody. May I now invite my colleague Richard to present his article? Richard says, thank you, Thomas. This is an article by da, 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 and off we go again. You can do this so well if you can find students who are willing, the good ones, the ones who seem to get it immediately, not the good ones, but the ones who are confident enough to get it, to sometimes go in twos into breakout rooms and support. But here's the two big things we've got to deal with. The monopolizer comes from the threat system, comes straight from the threat system. Overstimulated threat system. Gotta control. You gotta listen to me. We hear this a lot. And then we've things like festering resentment comes up amongst the quiet students who are known as freeloaders, simply because the dynamics get set in the first time the group meets, and they know they're shoved out. So we interview them. They say, yes, people will listen to somebody who hasn't even read the texts for ages and ages. He doesn't know what he's talking about. You have to be very forceful to get in. And I can't do it. So we hear lots and lots of things about happy lurkers. Actually, when we interview them, they're not happy at all. They've also paid to have other people critique their ideas in a gentle way. So the monopolizer, Yalom says, is often the most anxious person in the group. What are we going to do? The most anxious person in the group. It's very, very important to convey this to students, I would suggest, my friends, because everybody has been a monopolizer or witnessed a monopolizer ruin a meeting or a group meeting. And I've been one of the worst offenders. And I always remember once in a class many years ago, as tutor in front of the class, because I was answering every question, wanting to be worthy, it's just said to me, shut up, please. And I never spoke again. But I realize now how much damage I was doing and how people were being so polite and putting up with me, but they weren't learning anything from each other. They just had one engine when there were so many others to choose from to get the jet there. What a shame. So the monopolizer, Yalom tells us, the great psychotherapist says, do not silence the monopolizer. We want to hear more of substance from them, and it can be done. So if a monopolizer, for example, let's imagine online, Keisha is shy and she's going to come in and she's going to try and say something. And then here comes Jonathan. He's a monopolizer. And very, very soon you'll start to see things like this. Yes, but, and she's been pushed out. How was it that monopolizer, when we're thinking about group work like this, recorded online an hour, they record their group discussion, send it to you, and you mark it. By the way, this will reduce your workload. This is far, far less work than having to mark 3,000 word essays. And it has, and remember that at professorial level, external examiners are saying this is equivalent to 4 individual 2,500 to 3,000 words. This is the equivalent in our view. Much faster to mark this, much more meaningful, much more enjoyable than the constant essays. So you might, this student who's done this is going to lose marks unless the other group help him out. We do not want to silence the monopolizer. Maybe he needs some more time to settle himself down and be concise. Being concise is an art. But we've got to disrupt this. So here's what the others can do. So let's imagine Ahmed was here and Jonathan is carrying on like me, carrying on. Here's something you can teach him to do. When Jonathan draws breath, remember vigilance, notice, not normalize, the disadvantaging. He can just slip in there and say, Jonathan, that's a really interesting point you've made about a specific issue. Not, oh, thanks, Jonathan, and sweep him away. But to really, and we'll need this in the classroom, won't we, for children who are monopolizing and anxious, trying to control. And then in the same breath, have a listen to this. Jonathan, that's a really interesting point you've made about the safe circle. And it's very similar to something I was reading too. I'd love to talk to you about that. Keisha, could you, just in the same voice, could you come in and tell us a little bit more about what you were saying? Because I think that connects too. Thank you, Keisha. That's it. Turns out your students are brilliant at doing this. They can't help themselves again and again, but they help each other in the most extraordinary, resourceful ways. Let's imagine Keisha's so freaked out now she's not coming in. What you could say to Keisha is, look, this is freeze. It's from the threat system and it's not your fault at all. I feel the same when things like this happen, but what you can do is simply say, just put your hand up. Everybody knows the rules. She's just going to put her hand up. She's not ready yet, but she can say something like, Jacinta, could you help me out, please? Jacinta, could you help me out, please? Let's imagine Jacinda is also a very, very shy student and is thinking, holy moly, no. Actually, Jacinda won't feel that anymore. Her motivation has now changed. Keisha has personally asked her, help me. And in comes Jacinda, who may be even the quietest person in the class, and smashes it. We see this again and again and again. All we're doing here is working with the innate capacity for compassion, smart compassion that every student has. We could talk so what I would suggest to you is to say to them, the two big problems are monopolizing, before you even start anything, monopolizing, over talking. People do that when they're anxious. We have to learn not to, but we all need to help. And we all do it sometimes. And it's also very useful to bring in Yalom, Y-A-L-O-M. I'm sure you may have come across him, the great group psychotherapist who said monopolizers are often the most anxious people in the group. Do not silence them, help them speak. Their monopolizing is a kind of inarticulateness, actually. And tutors too often get seduced by the performativity of that, at the expense of everything else, the real learning. And the other problem is those who don't contribute, those who withdraw. But again, we would say it is up to everybody to address both problems, to validate and disrupt what the monopolizer says, to validate what the monopolizer says, but disrupt the behavior. But again and again, the whole group, including Jonathan, are making sure that every opportunity is taken to keep the door open, to open the door, to pull Keisha out of the dark water and onto the boat. She will come. If she's given enough opportunities, she will come. Selective mutism was the subject of a talk I was asked to go and give. I didn't know until I got there that it was selective mutism that was paying for my train journey to Exeter University, but that's what it was. And tutors wrote to me later on to say that students hadn't realized with these skills and techniques that learning and teaching could be like this. They hadn't realized it was life-changing. But here we've got to remember that the students did it for each other. They did it for themselves, and it took the workload off the staff, trying to make it work all the time, trying to let the selectively mute students, often high achieving, but with medical evidence that they would not speak. They're typing something, and then the tutor has to roll that out to the group when it's too late. The moment has passed. But now those selective mutism students taking part, participating in ways that delighted other students and wasn't expected. Another tip: the use of silences. Silences can be awfully awkward, and students are afraid of them, but actually to let them be. It is just the group breathing, thinking. One of the reasons is because international students particularly, or shy students, need those extra moments to pluck up their courage and get in. No point in me being overwhelmed with emotions when I see somebody drowning and leap in to save them, only to realize when I hit the water that I can't swim. The Compassionate Mind Foundation is a brilliant place to look for this. This is where a lot of this empirical work is going on. For 20 years, we haven't looked at it.